If you feel like you're hitting your forehands consistently late and or you're not getting a whole lot onto your forehands, it could really be that you're facing two common culprits that are messing with your forehand. In this video, I'll show you what they are and of course also how to fix them. Well, what you expect a coach to say is, well, you got to prep a little sooner if you don't want to hit the ball late. And yes, I will tell you exactly the same, but with two tweaks that will make it a lot clearer and a lot easier to understand exactly how to do that. Let's actually look at Michael's forehand here. He's one of my Patreon members, and one of the perks of being a Patreon member is that I do quick analyses of shots that you're sending me. I'll just let it run through and then we'll break it down in detail. Now, there's a whole lot of talk about you shouldn't break the plane and take the racket too far back here. And of course, I'm exaggerating. If you take it that far back, yeah, maybe you should reduce it a little bit. But what about the height of the take back? Obviously, if that goes to extremes, then it just takes you too long to take the racket all the way back and then let it drop and then swing up and forward to your contact point. And that is exactly the issue that Michael has on his forehand. So Michael's take back here, you clearly see how high he has that dominant hand, the racket hand, and it is clearly above his shoulder. As a really good rule of thumb, we want to keep the hand, your hitting hand, on the take back between the shoulder and the hip, because that way you're still hitting all the fundamentals that you need. You still get a really great coil. You get enough racket lift here so that you have a very good distance here then with the racket drop to then swing forward, accelerate up to your contact point. So just my regular forehand here. My hand is between hip and shoulder on my take back, and I still get my coil. I still have time to absolutely let that racket drop. And obviously that still gives me a big enough loop and I can still really accelerate. So between hip and shoulder. Now, obviously there's outliers. For instance, I'm thinking about Ash Barty, who had a relatively high take back, but she never had the issue of hitting late. But if you have an extremely high take back and then you're also preparing late, that's when you're really getting into trouble. And here's how you time your take back with a very, very simple cue that makes it super easy to work on this. And I'm shamelessly stealing the terminology from the tennis mentor, shout out to his channel, check him out, because he calls it beating the bounce. I call it, you want to have your racket at the highest and furthest point of your take back as the ball bounces that your opponent hit, so you have enough time to then fit in the racket drop and your acceleration up and forward to contact point. So yeah, let's stick with beating the bounce maybe. Now let's check the racket position as the ball is bouncing, and you see the ball coming into the frame right down here. And we can pinpoint exactly where it bounces. And you notice that the tip of Michael's racket is still looking forward here. And as the ball now is coming up again, you see how long it takes for Michael to get into the furthest take back right here. And the ball's already coming right at him here. So he doesn't even have the time to make contact further in front. And when we look at Michael's forehand, you see that he has still quite a ways to go to take his racket back and then drop into his loop as the ball is bouncing. He's about up here. So ideally, I would like for him to be here as the ball bounces. When you first start working on that, start with a reasonably paced ball, and then you work on taking the racket back, having it in your furthest and highest position right here as the ball bounces. And in the beginning, and especially now that I'm kind of focusing on it, it might feel like you're doing it a little bit robotically almost. It feels a little strange. Bam, racket back. And it might feel like you're actually having a little bit of a pause at the top of your take back. But I'm actually absolutely okay with that, even if you feel like you're almost having to wait for the ball, because that makes it a lot easier to adjust to faster balls, because obviously you have less time. And more importantly for me, if you're locked and loaded basically and you feel like you're almost having to wait for the ball to come to you, you now have the opportunity to actually get up to the ball inside the court and steal ground. And obviously the goal is to take time away from your opponent, but you also have to remember that by you coming in, you're also taking time away from yourself. But that should not be a problem now because, as I said earlier, bam, you now have your racket ready and you did beat the bounce. And a great way to see if you're making progress when you're working on this, and I also suggested that to Michael, is to film yourself, because you now know exactly where your racket should be at what point in time, and you can easily check if you're doing it right or you still need work on it.